Hello, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and participants. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Asia Pacific Rural Development and Food Security Forum 2022. I'm Shuli Ghosh. I'm delighted to be with you on this opening day. As all of us here know, food security is of major concern in Asia and the Pacific region, not least because of the COVID pandemic, which is still ongoing, but because of other major factors, including climate change, conflict, disaster, shrinking natural resources, and demographic shifts. It's clear that food systems need to be rethought and restructured into models which are more climate friendly and more sustainable. So over the next 3 days, this forum will be examining key issues and key challenges and seeking innovative solutions to make food systems more sustainable, more inclusive, and greener. So just a couple of housekeeping points before we get started. If you require translation at any time, there is a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and select the language you require. And also throughout the duration of the forum, there will be an opportunity to ask questions of our speakers. So please submit those questions at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom. First, though, to formally open proceedings, I am delighted to introduce Mr. Jingfeng Zhang. He is the Chief of Rural Development and Food Security Thematic Group at the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Zhang is also in charge of the Environment Thematic Group in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. He's responsible for ADB's operations on environment, natural resources, and agricultural development in regional and country programs. It is a pleasure to welcome you, Mr. Zhang.
Thank you so much, Shirley. Dear colleagues, dear guests, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all the participants. It is my honor to welcome all of you and also distinguished practitioners as the resources speakers today. As our moderator just said, the prolonged pandemic, increasing energy prices, persistent supply chain disruption, extreme weather, and also ongoing aggression of Russia to Ukraine have driven the food prices to their all-time high in the March. Global food crisis now is looming, and we need to carefully watch the situation and also take very quick actions to address the possible implications. Learning the lessons from the 2008 food crisis, we need to maintain the open flows of the trade. We also need to work with our developing member countries to enhance their social protection and also the safety nets. And together with our partners to provide the working capital liquidity to the small and medium enterprises. But when we're taking the immediate and also urgent actions, we must also recognize climate change still the single most important threats to the sustainability and also the resilience of the food system in Asia. So it's very, very critical for us to introduce medium and also long-term measures to build the food system resilience to cope with the climate change. The Rural Development and Food Security Forum, organized through our One ADB approach in collaboration with our partner organizations today, aims to share knowledge and also to strengthen ADB as well as our collective efforts with the partners to respond to the short price shock and also addresses the long-term climate change challenges. So through the 3-day sessions, we are discussing the collective actions to create the holistic climate smart agriculture, build the resilience to COVID-19 and the political conflicts, use the digital technology to link the small farmers to the big markets, improve the nutrition and the growth, and develop the green finance mechanism. The leader roundtable discussion today will start soon. We'll kick off this forum working sessions and sees sign for the regional challenging the food insecurity and also need for the food system transformation for the long-term sustainability and also the resilience. So thank you in advance to our leaders, speakers, panelists, and also participants who you will be sharing your expertise and insights on the on-the-ground experiences. I believe the discussions and the knowledge sharing will eventually help our developing member countries address the food price shock, close the financing gap, help the transforming our food systems, and also build the food system resilience in Asia and also Pacific region. So over back to you, Shani, and kick off this leader roundtable discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang. And I know that you will be staying with us as we begin the Leaders Roundtable session on the future of food and agriculture. Now, this roundtable is an opportunity for leaders from member countries, from governments, from development agencies, and the private sector to set out their visions of future food systems in Asia and the Pacific. What is needed in terms of finance mechanisms, in terms of policy, knowledge and technologies, and more importantly, how do we collaborate with the right partners to effect a transformation of our food systems. So we have a panel of experts and decision makers who will be sharing their experiences in all of these topics. But first, we're going to hear from two senior leaders in the field. So I'm very pleased to introduce, first of all, Roberta Casali, who is the Vice President of Finance and Risk Management at the Asian Development Bank. She's held more than 30 years of executive experience in central banking and the financial sector. She's held senior positions in the area of payment systems at the Bank of Italy in both national and international roles. And she's had significant private sector banking experience, having served on a number of boards of listed and private companies. So please welcome Roberta Casali.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Good evening and good morning to our distinguished guests, panelists, and colleagues. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Asia Pacific Rural Development and Food Security Forum 2022. This forum is taking place at a time when the world is facing escalated food and nutrition risks, and the hunger and nutrition-related achievements of the last 2 decades or so are showing reversal. We certainly need to protect the current food system from further disintegration and transform it into a climate-smart and green one to meet the future demand for food. So, the vulnerabilities. As we all know, the global food supply system is facing unprecedented challenges in recent times. In addition to usual perennial challenges, it has been deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing conflicts, which have immediate impacts and leave profound scars behind. Most developing countries are facing at least 2 out of 3 key food insecurity risks, namely extreme weather and climate change, economic shocks, and political crisis conflict, as assessed by the World Food Programme. Although there were indications of slight improvement towards the end of last year, like a small decrease in food price index, estimated by the FAO, it has begun rising again since the beginning of this year, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine is very likely to escalate the global food prices even more. Russia is the world's largest exporter of wheat and Ukraine, as we know, is the 5th largest. Together, they make up more than 1/3 of global cereal exports. Russia is also the global lead producer and suppliers of fertilizers. Globally, there are about 50 countries that depend on Russia and Ukraine for 30% of more that their wheat supply. Laos PDR imported more than 98% of its wheat from Ukraine in 2020. Supply chain and logistical disruptions on Ukraine and Russian grain will have significant global food security repercussions. More so on countries like the example I made of Laos PDR. High incidence of malnutrition was a matter of concern even before the onset of the pandemic. In 2021, 149 million children were stunted, 45 million wasted, and 39 million overweight globally. According to the Global Nutrition Report of 2021, progress to global nutrition targets is low. Less than 2/3 achieved the target of childhood overweight. And in case meeting the targets for male obesity, 100% are off track. And in case of women diabetes, only 3 countries or 6% are on track. So while the temporal challenges are formidable, we cannot forget the old problems that have been constantly affecting food production in developing Asia. According to World Bank statistics, per capita agricultural land in 2018 was only 0.11 hectares in South Asia and 0.10 hectares in East Asia and Pacific. This compares to 0.54 hectares in North America and 0.28 hectares in OECD countries in the same year. So when it comes to potable water, of which about 70% is used by agriculture, the overall situation is even more alarming. Available per capita water decreased from 40,000 cubic meter in 1800 to 7,000 cubic meter in 1997, and is projected to decrease to 4,700 cubic meters by 2025. In some parts of Asia, it's already less than 2,000 cubic meters, below which an area is called water stressed. An analysis of the OECD water risk hotspots for agriculture was titled in 2017, concluded that water risks in Northeast China and Northwest India could have significant food security consequences. According to a McKinsey report, Climate Risk and Response in Asia 2020, so the report was 2020, by 2050, parts of Asia are likely to see increasing average temperatures, little heat waves, extreme precipitation events, droughts, and changes in water supply. Asia is also confronted with increased number of mouths to feed and simultaneously decrease number of hands to produce food. Climate warming is already increasingly disrupting natural phenological patterns, and the risks I just mentioned are already creating immense pressure on the agricultural sector. With constantly decreasing agricultural land available, farmers are forced to produce more. Use of natural and synthetic fertilizer are, however, not a sustainable solution. Their increased use only reinforces the emission of greenhouse gases. We need to break this vicious cycle. Asia will face a huge problem for food production due to phenomenological shifts in crops, depending to escalated average temperature. So, the way forward. The most preeminent question for us is how do we build a resilient and sustainable food system withstanding the temporal and perennial problems we have? Not only that we have to invest more in agriculture, and what is needed, a qualitative change in our investments is definitely crucial, and is the answer. The investment must be strategic and science-based, and we need to focus on innovative technologies that offer nature positive solutions. I'm pleased to share that ADB's investments in agricultural and rural development increased by 5 times during the 2011-2021 period. The portfolio mix of our investments is also getting more diversified, covering different aspects of our food system. According to our 2021 annual evaluation review, the diversified investments in agriculture, natural resources, and rural development were largely successful in addressing poverty and inequalities and in promoting gender equality. Importantly, ADB also scaled up its knowledge work in support of food system transformation. For example, we completed a cross-country analysis to promote the production of fruit and vegetables and reduce post-harvest losses in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Nepal, Pakistan, and Vietnam. We also studied the Korean model of rural and agricultural development to devise customized, country-specific, and context-aware policy recommendations for our development member countries. Experience sharing and knowledge exchange through this rural development and food security forum will promote pragmatic solutions to the evolving challenges faced by the agricultural sector. So going forward, ADB is in the process of developing an innovative natural capital financing facility to attract natural capital investments and offer knowledge solutions to build better food systems and promote a more balanced diet. The facility has 3 pillars: a natural capital lab, an agribusiness service platform, and a natural capital fund. The lab is a living and virtual platform to incubate accelerate, and expand natural capital investments. It leverages existing accounting tools to quantify the ecosystem service value of green agricultural value chains. It also strengthens eco-compensation for ecological services, which in turn incentivizes farmers to adopt new innovative practices. To conclude, ADB is committed to working with all partners to step up support for climate-smart agriculture across the entire agriculture and food value chains, including blue economy, via policy and technological interventions using nature-based solutions where appropriate. Let us work together to promote a resilient and sustainable food system for future generations. And thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you, Ms. Casali, for that comprehensive overview. Some very sobering statistics there, but you know, that call to action, working together, yes, very well heeded. Thank you very much indeed. Let me introduce our next speaker now. Dr. Donal Brown is Associate Vice President of the Programme Management Department at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. He's responsible for developing and managing the operations that IFAD supports through loans and grants, and he oversees the programme of work of the department, which is undertaken by 5 regional divisions and the Operational Policy and Results Division. He formerly worked as the Africa Director at the UK's Department for International Development. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here today. So if I could have the first slide, please. So again, thank you, moderator, and thank you to Mr. Susantono for the introduction, and great to be part of this exciting panel today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've just got a quick presentation, which hopefully will build on what Roberta has just presented, and it will talk a little bit how IFAD views the challenges and opportunities of food systems in the region. For most of you, I think you would know that IFAD is the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and we focus particularly on rural communities and smallholder farmers. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So just again, to reiterate the context, obviously we've seen from COVID-19 and now the ongoing disruption in Ukraine, that this is having a significant impact on rural development, food security in the Asia Pacific region. And this is already on top of a significant negative impact on the Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 2, which have taken a real hit. Currently about 80 million people were going to be pushed into poverty over the last 2 years, but we were expecting a lot more with the impact of the Ukraine crisis, particularly in Asia Pacific region, many of the wheat importing countries such as Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So next slide, please. So while talking about the agriculture sector, it's important, I think, to look at some of the ongoing challenges in the region, which from an IFAD perspective, and particularly for small farmers, is still a continuing lack of digitalization and utilization of ICT for development tools. There's still need for more investment in human capital. And for us, there's a real gap in connecting SMEs and MSMEs to the wider value chain in Asia Pacific. And of course, there is a lack of voice and visibility of smallholder farmers who, despite the increase in commercial agriculture, provide much, if not most of the food. And of course, we've talked a little bit about climate threats. So next slide, please. Where does IFAD see the opportunity? I think there are four particular areas. The first one for us is transforming markets into a driver rather than an obstacle for inclusive, and I use the word inclusive and sustainable to highlight food systems through market-based innovations that actually support poor people's food purchasing power, but also empowers poor people to make better choices. The second area is something I just mentioned, which is focusing on expanding what we call the midstream of the agri-food sector and focusing on the off-farm enterprises. The midstream is dominated by SMEs and they have grown rapidly in recent years. And that midstream is really important for some of the poorer, smaller producers. It's created many employment opportunities in rural areas and food production and processing sectors, which has really increased the livelihood options and the resilience for small people with an opportunity to find waged employment. The third area is social protection. Even the best efforts to create more inclusive economic opportunities in the food system will not lift everyone out of poverty. And at the same time, as we've seen with COVID, but also as we're starting to see with Ukraine, poor rural communities and households are the ones most likely to be affected by the shocks that hit the system. And so that's where we feel that social protection also plays a role. And finally, we need to see increased involvement of the private sector, particularly in driving technology and technological solutions. So next slide, please. IFAD is mindful that we've got a big task ahead of us and we need to work together in partnership to do that. And for IFAD, that partnership is about knowledge sharing, about technological development, about mobilizing finance, and it's also about working closely with the regional development banks, the research institutes, and others, specifically to generate, document and share knowledge, to strengthen partnerships to identify innovative mechanisms for food production, transformation and commercialization, and to enhance our lending and non-lending instruments, bringing both financial and non-financial support at scale, so we can invest but also engage with the policy reforms necessary in the sector. So next slide, please. Going forward, IFAD recognises that we've got to really get some immediate responses, and we would suggest some of the key areas would be digital knowledge investments, particularly accessibility to rural information and communication, innovative markets to address the issues on agroecology to increase availability and production. And we see a real focus on local here as well. Climate smart agriculture, and linked to this, coordinated investment at scale that balances large scale commercial agriculture and intensive agriculture with smallholder investments. And in IFAD, we have a model for this. We call it the 4P approach. So it's not just public-private partnerships, but we talk about public-private producer partnerships. And I'd like to really emphasize that word producer. So that brings me to the end of this short presentation. And in conclusion, I'd just like to say that our food systems actually need to be disrupted to correct some of the power imbalances and to have more focus and investments on local food systems and production, local labour markets and local midstream businesses. And we can only achieve this through these strategic partnerships with government, private sector and producers. So thank you, and I look forward to an interesting discussion.
Dr. Brown, thank you very much indeed for that. Yeah, and very interesting, useful observation on the need for better and more effective partnerships. And we will be talking about that in just a moment, in fact. So let me now introduce our panel. who are going to be answering questions on all of the topics that have been raised. I'm very pleased to have with us Professor Shengyan Fan. He is the Chair, Professor and Dean of Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy at China Agricultural University. He's also the former Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, and currently serves as a member of the UN Lead Group for the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. We also have with us Yutaka Arai, who is the Vice Minister for International Affairs at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries for the Government of Japan. She's also served as Director General for the Food Industry Affairs Bureau and as Director General for the Food Safety and Consumer Affairs Bureau. And we have Cao Duc Phat, the Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees for the International Rice Research Institute, IRI, based in the Philippines. Until 2021, Dr. Phat was Permanent Deputy Chair of the Central Economic Commission. And prior to that, he was the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam. Great to have you with us. So let's dive straight in with the first round of questions. And Professor Fan, I'm going to start with you. We've already heard some of these concerns. A key concern for food security right now, that is Russia's military operation in Ukraine. A lot of fears over the shortage of grain and rising food prices. What are your concerns for food security in the region regarding that issue? I can't hear Professor Fang. I think you've got your mute on. We seem to have lost audio and visual. Let's just give it a moment.
Yeah, try to reconnect.
Ah, there you are. Excellent.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, we can. So let me ask.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
Concerns for food security because of the ongoing conflict and Russia's military action in Ukraine.
Sure. I would call the current situation as a perfect storm. Even before the Russian-Ukraine crisis, we already face the big challenges in our global food and nutrition security. Food prices were already rising. The supply chain was disrupted. Trade was not working. So now the crisis, Ukraine-Russian crisis, added another big element into this perfect storm. So what should we do? I think currently we have to do several things in short run. One is the trade. We must make sure that global trade work. No country should use export bans to ban their exports to the global market. You know, if some countries do that, then the global food system will collapse. That's number one. So number two is the biofuel. We know that when the oil price goes up, the oil price is very high now, then the biofuel production will become very profitable. So let's make sure that we do not allow more biofuel production converted from grain. So number three is we must make sure that certain countries must invest, must support producers to produce more during the crisis, Africans, South Asians, to provide input support, financial support, technical support to make sure that next season they are going to have a bumper crop. Number four is at a global level. We need to work together to bring food to the people who are in need. The World Food Program or other relief agencies must work together. Maybe some of the countries that have very high grain stocks need to release some of their food to WFP or other global, let's say, agencies to help them to go through this very dangerous, very unstable food insecure situation. I will stop over here. I will be very happy to talk about a long-term strategy.
Well, let's have a look at that. I mean, when we talk about trying to rethink food systems and restructure them, what do you think is the key challenge in creating a system that is more sustainable and more resilient?
Yeah, certainly. I have been working on the food system transformation for almost 15 years as Director General of IFPRI. We were pushing very hard Because we knew that the food system was not sustainable. They didn't produce healthy, nutritious food. So the transformation is needed, must be disrupted, as the vice president of the IFAD said. I think number one is policy failure. We failed in policy. Right now, we spend so much money in subsidizing water, fertilizers, in producing certain grains. That destroys our environment, destroys our biodiversity. So we must stop that. We must use the money differently to support more sustainable, healthy, nutritious food production, as the vice president of ADB, as the vice president of IFAD mentioned. So I think fix a policy to repurpose or re-optimize this government support of subsidies. That's number one. Number two is a technology. We failed in developing so-called multiple wind technologies. In the past, we only pursue one wind. For example, Green Revolution, wind in yield. But by doing that, we destroyed our environment. We used too much water, too much land. We lost so much biodiversity because of one wind technology, simply just focus on yield. But today, we must pursue multiple wind technologies, wind in yield, wind in nutrition. We must add micronutrients into our crops, or maybe diversification. And
I think we might have lost Professor Fan again, but we will bring him back, and we will circle back round to that discussion, particularly about micronutrients and better technology. Let me turn now to Vice Minister Yutaka Arai, and Vice Minister, I know you're going to be answering in Japanese, so a reminder to the audience that they can select English translation if required. So let me start with Japan's commitment to supporting sustainable food systems in Asia and the Pacific. Japan made this commitment at the UN Food Systems Summit, at the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit. Can you share with us Japan's vision on the future of food systems in the region?
はい、ありがとうございます。このような時期に食料安全保障をテーマとするこのようなフォーラムを開いていただいて感謝をしております。この食料安全保障のレジリエンスについては、今回のウクライナの問題が起こる前から非常に重要な課題ということが認識をされておりました。今回のロシアのウクライナ侵攻によってそれがより顕在化したということ、それから各国が取るべき政策をいち早く取っていかなければいけないという点において大きなインパクトがあったというふうに思っております。こういう中、地球全体としては気候変動の中でより地球に負荷をかけないようなグリーンあるいは生物多様性等に環境に配慮した農業をしていかなければいけないということで、まさにさっきファン先生の言葉にもありましたけれども、いろいろな課題を解決していかなければいけない。生産性の向上だけではなく地球環境に対する負荷も減らすということで、こういう中においてはいろんな知恵を皆さんの知恵をですね、やはり総動員していかなければいけないという状況だというふうに思っています。それは世界各国どこでも同じだというふうに考えています。その中、まず一番目の問題として課題を提供いたしたいのは、農業セクター、これは全体としては温室効果ガスの排出量の 20% から 30% を占めているというふうに言われていますけれども、農業分野への投資は気候ファイナンスのわずか 3.6% というふうに報告をされています。こういう点においては、特にこれからイノベーションというものが必要になってくるという中にありましては、このような農業分野への投資をさらに加速化させていくということが非常に重要だというふうに考えています。このような農業分野へのイノベーションは、これから農業とかですね、生態学というだけではありません。ロボット工学であるとか、他の知見もここに同意していかなければいけないということだと思っています。このような中、日本では去年の5月に2050年を目標した持続可能な食料システムというものを策定いたしました。この中でまさに環境負荷を低減しつつ生産性向上と持続可能性を達成するということで、特にイノベーションの必要性というのを説いてまいりました。その中、国内のイノベーションだけではなく、 アジアモンスーン地域ということで、特に水田農業が大きなウェイトを占めるアジアにおいて、日本がここで協力をしていくということをこの戦略の中に書いたわけです。この協力についても、まさに資金面、それから人材面、いろいろありますけれども、今日聞いておりまして、皆様の思いは一つだというふうに思っております。具体的な仕組みをどこまで展開していくか、それぞれのまさに農地、農業、地域にとってですね、何が重要かという実践がこれから必要になってくるというふうに考えています。以上です。
Thank you. And Vice Minister, briefly, what kind of international cooperation do you think is needed to realize that vision?
はい。はい。まさに国際協力という点においては、今日、ADB のフォーラムでございました。それから各国の農業関係の省庁、それから、日本、いろいろ各国でもですね、技術協力の公社なり法人というのが、それぞれ現地で活動しています。そういうものを現地でやはりプラットフォームを作って協力していく。一つ一つがですね、プロジェクトで入っていくというのではなくて、例えば、英国のある地域ということに関しては、そこに関心を持つ、あるいは知見を持っている人たちが、現場に近いところでプラットフォームを作っていくと、そういう試みが必要なのではないかというふうに思っています。それは実は日本においてもですね、できていません。官のいろんな支援システムと、それから民間企業のシステム、それが日本の同じような取り組みも実はプラットフォームができていないという状況にあります。今そのようなプラットフォームを作るべく、官民連携のですね、作業部会というのを立ち上げたところです。これをさらに国際機関、それから他の国の政府と連携をさせていくということによって、知見の共有が図れ、より早い問題解決ができていくのではないかというふうに考えています。そういう中にありまして、さっき司会の方からもお話ししました、昨年のですね、国連食糧システムサミットというのは非常に大きな形、成果を収めたと思っています。それは官民、それから NGO がそれぞれ協力するという枠組みが食糧分野で初めてできたということであります。これをさらに具体化させていくために、我が国としては、今年の秋の世界食糧デー10月になりますけれども、そこに合わせまして、アジア太平洋地域の関係国間で食糧システムの変換に向けた取り組みや知見を共有するというためのイベントを FAO と協力して開催をしようというふうに思っております。そういういろいろな連携を作ることによってですね、より実践的な問題の解決ができていくというふうに考えています。以上です。
Thank you very much indeed, Vice Minister. Let me bring in Dr. Phat now. I know that you've been leading the extraordinary growth of food and agriculture value change in Vietnam. In your view, what is the future agenda of food transformation in Vietnam and South Asia? Dr. Phat, your microphone is on mute.
Thank you, Mrs. Shirley, very much for your compliment. The COVID-19 pandemic, with disruptions in the food system around the world, once again remind us about the need of building a long-run resilient agri-food system in each country and internationally. But the modern agri-food system can no longer be a traditional one, which aims mainly continuous providing more food to consumers and more income for producers despite of shocks. There are few more requirements which must be met. First, the new food system must be low carbon, climate smart, and environment friendly. Second, the new food system must be internationally competitive. And third, the new food system must be inclusive. In Vietnam, the main national food security targets have been achieved. but there are still many issues to be solved. Agriculture contributes about 19% of total greenhouse gas emission of the country, and nearly 56% of it is from the rice field. Agriculture and food sector must lay big effort to contribute to implementation of Vietnam commitment at the COP26, at the same time protecting the environment, making rural life more pleasant. By now, Vietnam has signed 17 different free trade agreements. The country is getting more and more open and integrated with the world market. It creates a lot of opportunities, but it brings also a lot of challenges. The main challenge is the strong international competition. We need to accept and be prepared for that competition in order to make our agriculture more efficient. For last 3 decades, the poverty rate in Vietnam has been decreasing quickly. However, it is still high in some remote rural areas. At the same time, disparity in living conditions between the rural and the urban areas is widening in absolute terms. Development of agriculture has been contributing effectively to poverty reduction in the country. Now, it must make even more contribution to lift up the livelihood for those poor communities. I see the same issues in most countries in the Southeast Asia. It is not easy to achieve all those goals of the resilient food system at the same time, but they are achievable if there are following 4 factors, in my opinion. 1, there is strong political commitment and leadership. 2nd, right policy and legal environment, like Dr. Phan suggested. 3rd, good technology available. And 4th, adequate financial resource available. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phan. And can I must keep this answer brief because we are running out of time. We've talked a lot about partnership, collaboration. How important is it to have development partners like the Asian Development Bank? How do they help?
For the most developing countries, especially those in transition like Vietnam, it is very important to have development partners like ADB. There are 2 most important kinds of assistance this partnership can provide as follows. The first, policy advice. Through technical assistance, ADB has been helping to bring in the best expertise from around the region and the world to assist the government to review the situation and give most relevant recommendation for policy changes or for selection of the best management practices. For last 3 decades, the main factor contributed to the success of Vietnam agriculture was the policy reform. ADB and other development partners have been helping very effectively in this reform process. Second, financial support for transformation and supporting also policy reform. For Vietnam agriculture for last 3 decades, ADB has provided large amount of ODA for implementation of a large number of projects on development of infrastructure, rural road, irrigation, water supply network, upgrading research and training facilities, poverty reduction, forest protection and planting. Those projects have to address crucial issues of agriculture and rural development in Vietnam. For Asian rice-growing countries, availability of a well-developed irrigation network is a foundation for development of a stable and highly efficient rice production, in particular, and agriculture as a whole. Nowadays, we need further such kind of support to cope with new challenges, including adaptation to climate change, reduction of emission, promoting effective transformation of the agri-food system.
Thank you, Dr. Phat. Okay, it's time now to get some questions from the participants, from the audience, and I see that quite a few of them have been coming in. So let's kick off with this one. And Professor Phan, I'm going to ask you this question. This is a very interesting question. We've heard a lot about climate smart agriculture and changing the way farming is done. But a question has come in saying, can this really produce enough food for a rapidly growing population? It's going to have to feed billions. And yes, we do need climate smart agriculture, but is it going to be enough?
Yes. Well, as I said, we failed in policy, we failed in technology, and probably we also failed in supporting smallholders. So I think if we can fix these failures, the smallholders will be able to contribute to global food and nutrition security. So for example, certain technologies smallholders must adopt to help to mitigate the climate change and help to adapt to climate change. But they need to support, I think, as the Vice President of IFAD and the ADB have already mentioned, certain advice, certain financial access, certain technical services provided to smallholders. They will be able to produce enough food, nutritious and healthy foods. And also, if we provide certain so-called carbon credit, right now the farmers are not compensated for sequestrating carbon into soil. So there's great potential. For example, Dr. Phat, he used to be the Minister of Agriculture in Vietnam. If the smallholders in Vietnam can sequestrate, let's say, or reduce the methane emission from rice production through all the technologies, but rice producers need to be compensated. So 1 ton of methane, maybe they needed to be, compensated, I don't know, $10, $20, $30, it's called a carbon dioxide equivalent. So I think we need to raise carbon prices. We need to make sure that smallholders need to access to that as credit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Phan. We're getting quite a few questions about global food prices. That is, of course, a major concern. And members of the audience asking, how do we stabilize global food prices? Because there are so many factors ongoing which affect food prices. I don't know if any of the panelists wants to jump in and answer that question, or perhaps I can come to you, Dr. Phat. What do we do about the rising food prices? That is of huge concern to many people, both consumers and producers.
I think in short run, like Dr. Phan said, it's very important to maintain the one trade system without too much obstacle. And secondly, we need to have better information about the food market, both on supply and demand, to avoid such situation like in 2008, because of misinformation. Some countries rush to buy some exporting countries, or even stop exporting, and there was a lot of confusion and price shot up. We need to avoid all kind of confusion to the world food market. So in short run, in long run, as we've been discussing, we need to assist to maintain growth of food production and also from demand side to improve the way we are consuming and make it more green, sustainable.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Phat. We've had a couple of questions about coordinating policies, for example, on things like technologies, water and energy related technologies, to make systems more climate resilient and sustainable. But in practice, we don't have enough coordinated policies in place. Let me bring in the government voice that we have. Vice Minister Arai, you were talking about the need to have one platform where you bring everyone together so that there is proper collaboration. How does that extend to integrated policies across all departments of government to make sure that there is a consistent approach to transforming food systems? Again, I think you're on mute.
非常に難しい課題ですけれども、今回まず問題の鍵となるのは、世界中のそれから官、それから民、NGO がですね、同じ方向を向いているということです。同じ方向を向いているということは非常に重要なことで、その中において政策の解が生まれてくるのではないかということです。短期的には穀物市場非常に混乱すると思います。それはまさに供給に足りるだけの需要に足りるだけの供給が行われないということがはっきりしたということが大きな原因です。で、このロシアとウクライナの問題が発生する以前も、すでに穀物価格は上昇基調にありました。そういう中にあって在庫水準がそれなりに世界的に見るとあるにもかかわらず穀物の価格が上昇していたというのはお話がありましたが、特定の国がやはり在庫を高く持っていた、いわゆる買い占めたということが主要な原因になるというふうに言われています。そういう中においては、情報を透明化するところによって特定の国に在庫が偏在をしないということも重要ですし、これから飢餓の人口も増えていくというふうに言われています。そういう中にあっては、世界が WFP などの国際機関を通じて、やはり支援を強化していくということがもう一つ必要だと思っています。それから政策の統合性であります。そういう中において大きな役割を果たすのは一つは国際的な機関だというふうに思っています。ADP は特にアジア途上国政府と強い結びつきがありまして、現地のインフラ技術プロジェクト、それから最近では人材育成や研修事業も行っています。こういう国際機関が主軸となって、やはり政策の対応をしていくというのが一つの大きなキーだと思っておりますし、ここには日本も積極的に参画をしていきたいというふうに考えています。そういう中、特にアジア地域においては、今話もありましたが、水田におけるメタンの発生というのが、地球変動の中で大きな、問題というふうになっています。メタンについては、日本も国際的なプロジェクトに参加をしておりますし、水田におけるメタンの発生を抑えるということに対する技術的ないろいろ支援というのも、アジアモンスー地域のですね、気候変動の問題を解決する中で一つ重要な課題だと認識をしておりますので、そういう具体的な技術を持ってですね、それぞれのアジア地域で貢献をするということでやっていきたいというふうに思っています。政策の統合、これはまさにこれから必要だということですけれども、できるだけ多くのこういうフォーラム、あるいはいろいろな対応を通じてですね、同じ方向にある人たちが活動をしていくということで、政策の対応は捉えていくのではないかというふうに考えています。以上です。
Yes, indeed. And it's good to hear how ADB can help with all of those issues. Another question, I think we've got time for one more. One question that's been asked a couple of times is, given that impacts like COVID-19, like the conflict in Ukraine, has affected global supply chains and the global food value chain so severely, should we now try and reshape food systems to a more localized food system and devolve it to a more local level? And maybe I can come to you, Professor Fan, to answer that question.
Yes, I do think all the challenges have led us to think about our future food systems. Yes, we need to trade because the country in the north will not be able to produce tropical fruits, and the country in the south will not be able to produce, let's say, certain foods from the north. So we need to trade. But on the other hand, our trade system has also become very fragile because of the purely just for efficiency reason. So the resilience must be part of it, and nutrition, health must be part of it. So let's make sure that global trade work, but global trade work must work for the poor and hungry people. In this case, local production definitely has certain advantage because they are close to the community. Community can generate jobs, can generate income, and they can reduce transportation, reduce the carbon emissions. So I think we need both. And which way is more important really depends on the location, depends on economic situation, and depends on, let's obviously, the environmental footprints. So we can develop certain framework or even certain models to optimize the combination of global trade as well as local production.
Thank you very much, Professor Fan. I think that brings us to the end of this session. I think we've had a lot of, pardon the phrase, food for thought there, a lot of information and issues and challenges, and it was great to hear what people on the ground who are working at the forefront of these transformations are actually doing to try and achieve the transformation. Thank you to all the speakers who've taken part in the roundtable discussion. I think it's really important to get not just the policy perspective, but also the partnership perspective to enable these effective mechanisms that we need. We're going to take a short break for now, but the next session will commence shortly. Now, in the meantime, I would like to encourage participants to complete the session evaluation form. It's just a couple of questions. It's very important for us. You'll see it on your Zoom screen presently, and there you go. So if you have time to please answer those questions for us, that is very useful for us. Thank you again to all my speakers, all my participants, and everyone who submitted questions. We'll take a short break and hope to join you again in a couple of minutes.